But, of course, your first sort of high-profile collaboration was on a podcast dedicated to American politics, which is why you've kindly agreed to talk to me about the significance. I'll start with you, Emily. The significance of Trump's announcement yesterday and the possibility that he might have postponed it given the unexpected disappointment of the midterms from his point of view.
It was teleprompter Trump, wasn't it? Last night, 3 o'clock this morning for some of us. And it was very on message. And it was quite, I thought, subdued. If you compared what he sounded like when he was in Ohio backing one of his candidates, J.D. Vance, there was the energy and there was the shout and the mass. And this time it had that sort of slightly Temazepam feel to it, I thought, like he was going to do it because he had to. He was like one of those parents that's been told, you've got to follow through. If you said you'll do something, you've got to follow through. Everyone around him was telling him not to do it. They were saying it's like launching off the Hindenburg's just gone down. It's the worst possible time to do it. He knows that. He was making up numbers about the people he'd supported and whether they'd won or not. I mean, the blunt truth is the swing seat races where his candidates were standing did not perform well. And yet he had to come out and do that because he'd trailed it. It's the worst thing ever when you've said you're going to do something and you're made to stand there and do it. But it didn't feel like his heart was quite there. Which
speaks of the confidence he must have had, John, that the polls were right. So what happened? What went wrong? There's one theory I've heard I quite like is that they completely discount anybody under 30 because nobody under 30 would ever answer a call from an unknown number, which is probably not quite
100% right.
It's probably part of the problem, isn't it? Or part of the issue.
Do you know what? The pollsters are taking a bit of a victory lap and they're saying we did get it right. We were actually the ones who said there wasn't going to be this red Republican wave and they were going to sweep to control of the House and the Senate. I think what's happened is, as Emily said, that if you look at certain states where there were races played out, where there was, a race for the governor, and the governor wasn't a Trump-supporting person, they did pretty well. But where the Senate candidate, and it's the same electorate voting, was a Trump supporter, they did badly. That happened in Georgia. That happened in Wisconsin. And so it's really interesting that you can make the calculation that Trump did badly in that election, and Trump supporters. Now, his name may not have been on the ballot,
sure,
but Trump backed.
Everybody knew.
But everybody knew. And what's really interesting is that I think the reason why Trump has gone, as Emily said, I've said it, so I've got to do it. And I think that Trump doesn't want to look weak, but equally, I think 1, it means that he can raise a lot of money still. 2, he makes himself the centre of attention, Donald Trump's favourite place in the whole world to be. But 3, and consider this, there is a lot of legal jeopardy that Donald Trump is facing now, not just the normal kind of writs that are flying. This is the Department of Justice potentially, taking him to court. I think an Attorney General would be incredibly bold to decide to take action against someone who is running to be the next president.
I'm going to take issue with that because there is absolutely no immunity provided for somebody who is standing for candidate. And I think it's really important to recognise that the American Constitution doesn't have any recognition of somebody who is a post-president. There's no office of post-president. There's no office of running for president. Yes, when it gets close to the election, when you're about a month out, 3 weeks out, then you might find people unwilling to step in. But I'm not sure it should or would enter a calculation.
This is our podcast where we just disagree with each other. I tell you what, I think that's wrong. I think that the idea that everyone is equal before the law is a great idea in principle. You would have to take into account the political calculation of launching a legal case against an ex-president and someone who is running to be president again. And I think the idea that the Department of Justice and the Attorney General are immune from what the consequences of that would be is for the birds.
Because they have personal and even political ambitions of their own, which would come into play.
Look, don't forget, when he was facing impeachment,
yes.
right?
The first time or the second time?
Either time, his own supporters were saying, this is not the place. There are courts of law that can settle this. This is not the place. Impeachment's a very political, he called it a witch hunt. There are courts and there are criminal, allegations. This can all be settled outside. Now it is. He's facing, 4, 5 different legal suits. And actually, the idea that you could just say, I'm running and everything gets dropped, I think is ridiculous.
Okay.
I mean, I think you couldn't, as the Attorney General, stand there and... Sorry.
You can return to this theme later on the newsagents. I want to know from you, John, from your time in the States with the Beeb as the American editor, is there any way to tell post-lie who was going along with it for reasons of ambition and who actually believed it, who actually...
I think you can discern that. I think there are the true believers who decided that the election was stolen and they absolutely bought into everything that Donald Trump was saying. And there were those who thought it was expedient. And that was not because they wanted to get on with Donald Trump. It was because they were terrified of Donald Trump. And they felt unless they bought into this ridiculous story that the election had been stolen, Donald Trump would come and kill them. And more or less, he did.
Yes.
Anyone who stood up against Donald Trump found themselves being what they call primaried, i.e. they were challenged about whether they could stay in their seat, and invariably they lost. And all those people who said Donald Trump lied, he lost the election, now find themselves either retiring and leaving politics or have been forced out.
Interesting.
Isn't it extraordinary, though, that we are talking about Trump no longer having that sort of, magnetism to him? The straw that broke the camel's back wasn't that he actually tried to overturn an elected government. It wasn't that there was an assault and attempted coup on the Capitol. It was a political calculus whereby he didn't seem to be winning anymore. Think of all the acolytes. Think of all the enablers around him. That's what this story is about. It's not even about Trump. It's about those who've put him in power.
Up to and including Rupert Murdoch, who of course didn't pull the rug from under Donald Trump after the attempted coup or after the deaths on January the 6th or after any of that, but has now reportedly. How significant is that, Emily?
Do you remember? I mean, OK, this sounds really nerdy, but I remember over the 2020 election, on that night, it was Fox News that called Arizona for Biden, and Trump got really angry. And it was the first sort of hint that they were going to, start to pull away and start being the sort of the news channel rather than the acolyte channel. Now, the New York Post, also owned by Rupert Murdoch, has shown a whole variety of front pages, including that recent one about Humpty Dumpty, the Trump falling off the wall, and wasn't that a mess, and he never built the wall. But last night, they did stay on it longer. Fox News stayed on the Trump speech longer than anyone else. I don't think Murdoch has made up his mind. I think he'll wait to see if he's a winner.
Which way the wind is blowing, and if he looks winningy enough, then there could be another change underway. Jon Sopel, Emily Maitlis, thank you so much. The newsagents. What time does it drop roughly for people?
Well, roughly
5
5.
o'clock-ish.
Every day.
Drive
time, roughly.
But sometimes the train gets delayed, like, when
Leaves
you're trying
on
to
the
commute
line.
home. Leaves on the line, exactly.
I should say, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, that you're both working on incredibly hard on it. It shows in the quality of the product and indeed in the popularity of the product. But there is sometimes when big beasts come over to LBC, then those medium-sized beasts that are already here, we worry a little that you might be just coming.
Stop it. Methinks he doth protest.
You might be coming to do a sort of lap of honour or something like that. Or
we will never be in your zoo, you huge beast.
The graph that you're putting in is an example to us all. And of course, it's paying dividends, which you can listen by subscribing to newsagents, which you can get,
Penguin biscuit,
you can get from Global Player.
Bar on the way out.